What's going on, everybody? Listen, it is season 3 of Zave's Corner, and I could not be more excited than to be back. Happy New Year to all of our favorite friends that join us at Zave's Corner. Listen, it seems like it's been a minute since we've got right here in the corner, but thank God we are back. We are back. And what better way than to start 2021 with such a dynamic topic and conversation. Listen, as you are watching, I need you to do me a favor. Y'all are not new to this. I need you to make sure that you hit that share button and invite your friends. Tell them to join us right here in this conversation. Let us know where you are watching from. I see Auntie Joy. Happy New Year to you. Mother T, Happy New Year. God bless you. Thank you all so much for being here. In this last 6 months, maybe since we've been, no, maybe not that long, maybe about 4 since we've been together. I've had a birthday. Happy belated birthday to me. 26 years around the sun, and I'm so excited to see what God is going to do in this 26th year. He's been so faithful. He has kept me safe from a pandemic, an ongoing pandemic. He's kept me safe from so many things that I'm sure he's done for you. But tonight, I'm so honored to have these guests with me, returning guests of Zave's Corner, to kick off season 3, because there truly is much for us to talk about. Tonight, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I didn't really like the seating in the last season, so I'm going to be standing up tonight. So y'all forgive me if you can't see the t-shirt, but shout out to my mother, Valerie Scott, who has designed all of Zave's Corner's t-shirts. She has even gone this so far to make me a glass and a mug. So you all make sure that you check my mom out. That's a shameless plug for her customizations, Val John Customs. Be sure to support a Black-owned business, because if you don't support a Black-owned business, nobody else will. We got to support each other, especially when it comes down to our community. Listen, some things never change. And of course, we've got to have our few announcements. If you're looking to partner with the Greatness Foundation and the great work that we continue to do in the community, 2021 is going to be so much bigger than 2020 was. So we've got 4 ways for you to partner with us. You can PayPal us at greatfoundxr@gmail.com. You can Zelle us at 404-435-3089. You can Cash App us at Greater Love 1208, or you can make all checks payable to Greater Love Enterprises, P.O. Box 492-574, and that's Atlanta, Georgia 30349. And again, we are so excited about all the partnerships, the renewed partnerships that we will share in this year as we continue to show the world a greater love. Amen. And so we're so excited about that. And then mark on your calendars now, because I believe in doing things ahead of time. Mark on your calendars now. Next week, I'll be sitting down with these 4 ladies to talk about grieving and healing. And the title of that is As I Climb This Mountain. All right. So you make sure that you be a part of this conversation, because next week we're talking about grief and healing. We always focus on the grief part and how that hurts us, but we never look and measure, how do we heal? And I promise you, the stories of these 4 ladies is going to change your life. You are going to look back and say, I can't even imagine how they made it, but it is the grace of God. And so for that, we're thankful. Listen, again, I'm so very excited to have all of you all here this evening. As you continue to join us, we are just going to have a dynamic conversation, and it is entitled The State of the Black Church. Listen, I'm not going to do you like how we do in church when we could actually see each other. I'm not going to tell you to touch your neighbor, because hopefully you are socially distant where you are, or you're just with your family. But we've got to talk about some things, because life has been different. All right. We have seen some things that maybe you did not see coming, or maybe I didn't see coming. Well, we need to talk about it and unpack it. And so tonight, I'm so honored, so blessed, and so privileged to have 2 great leaders in the gospel. First, let me say we originally had 4 panelists tonight. One of our panelists actually took ill, and so we want to remember to keep them in our thoughts and prayers, please, that not only will the Lord touch them, but that it won't spread into their household, and that they should have a speedy, healthy recovery without any lack or without any fail, in Jesus' name. And then our other panelists had an emergency that came up, and so of course we always understand when you've got some things that you've got to take care of. But they are both always welcome here on Zave's Corner anytime their schedule permits. And of course, as always, we're always glad to have anybody take the time to sit with us in Zave's Corner. Yes, Auntie, that's right. I wasn't going to throw it out there, but I did get a gold mic because, what else would a king do? You got to have your gold microphone. But listen, I'm so very excited for the new changes that we are witnessing. And I'm so very excited for this dynamic panel discussion that we're about to have tonight. The first person that I'd like to bring out is no stranger to Zave's Corner. I think she actually said on the second show that we had, she is a spiritual mother. She is a world-renowned teacher and leader, but most of all, she is a God-fearing woman. And I thank God for the anointing and the wisdom that rests upon her life. She is none other than the Apostle Ivy Springer. And we are so grateful to have you, Apostle. Welcome back.
God bless you. God bless you. Thank you for having me. I count it such an honor. I mean, you're doing things. We have a gold mic now, and I'm feeling some kind of way here. Like I really have stepped off into some greatness hanging around you. So thank you, sire. Thank you.
Well, listen, thank God. We only go higher. We can't go lower.
Come on now. That's it. Come on.
Listen, Apostle, I'm so grateful to have you again joining us. It looks like you got a shout out from none other than Miss Candace. She says, "Hey, Mom." So shout out.
Yes, honey. Come get your cheering, baby. God bless you.
You might have been called out, Candace. But thank you so much for being here, Apostle. And I'm looking forward to hearing just what the Lord has placed in your heart to share with the people tonight. This next gentleman that we have is also not a stranger to Zave's Corner. We're cousins by marriage, but I feel like the bloodline is somewhere in there. So hopefully we don't have to print blood, but it's there. And I'm so grateful that through my cousin, I have made a divine connection with this powerhouse. His teaching, his knowledge, and just the way that he can rightly divide the word of God is just mind-blowing. You don't find many theologians that are able to really dissect the word of God and make it transparent and plain, and also keep it G. I mean, he's just so cool. I don't know if his congregation call him Pastor B, but I think that's the nickname we're going to use because Pastor B is just that cool. So thank you so much, Pastor Brandon Washington, for joining us tonight. Welcome, Doc.
Thanks for having me. I'm like the Apostle. My microphone is the wrong color. I feel away.
Right. Nobody gave us the memo.
I think that once we get our second visit to Zave's Corner, everyone's supposed to get a gold mic. I think that's how it works.
Listen, y'all start working because when the pandemic opens up and we can all get together physically, we're gonna have a live Zave's Corner. So hopefully we'll all have gold mics at that.
Awesome.
I in all honesty, I stole the idea from Bishop Paul Morton when he was, I think, having some celebration for his birthday. They presented him with a gold mic, and he travels with his gold mic.
Come on now, yeah.
So I said, hey, I need to take my game up a notch. If he can travel with a gold mic, I can be stationary with one. So y'all pray for the humility in me. And Pastor B, looks like you've got a shout out as well. Somebody says that's my man. So he is happily married and looks like my cousin has already put it out there. Hey, cousin. But listen, y'all, how we do it in Zave's Corner. The only house rules that we have is we keep it real, we keep it honest, and we keep it transparent. We don't bash, we don't knock each other down. We are here just to have an open conversation. And so we don't tolerate disrespect, but we do invite you to join in the conversation. Drop your questions, drop your comments down. And as they come into us, we will flash them on the screens. Again, I'm so very honored to have you all here with me tonight. And let's talk about it. So we are witnessing so much going on around us. Come March, we will have literally been in this pandemic a
full year.
We will have literally been in this pandemic a year. And I challenge anybody that says by March we'll be out of this pandemic, because right now the science that is presented to us just does not make that a reality. Right. What has it been like pastoring your congregation in a pandemic? And you all know how we do. Just jump in there. We don't even have to call names.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've had to do, I've had to learn technology. And trust me when I tell you I'm not there. So thank God for the people around me, my sister, especially my daughter, my grandchildren. Everybody is hands on. G Mama do this, sis do this, and assisted me. But what I have also found is that when you are willing and you stop fighting the system and just sort of flow with it, God opens up other doors and opportunities. Sometimes we can get so stuck in what we do and the way that we do it that we really make ourselves very narrow-minded and boxed in. But there's so many things that we can do that we could not really do just gathering. So many more people that we can reach. And our agenda, our schedule has increased greatly. I was teasing my daughter a minute ago, but Pastor Burton, she does a Bible study on, every Monday. We have people doing something on Wednesday, specialized classes. And we're actually able to get together more because of the convenience of. And so although I don't want us to get spoiled, at the same time, I have to admit that it's been wonderful. And we've had the opportunity to utilize ministry with so many other people on our staff and in our community. And so although it's been a challenge, it has definitely been a great place of stretching and empowering for us.
Amen.
Yeah, I'm not the most tech savvy person either. In fact, I have 3 rules when it comes to technology, and the first one is if you don't have to use it, then don't. So that's why all my friends chastise me. They tease me because they have switched over to electronic books, and I buy books because the batteries don't die. So, but we've been doing it via Zoom every Sunday morning live since March. And our church actually gathers in a school. So we would probably be in a situation where when most people are returning to their corporate gathering, it may not be an option for us. We're actually looking for a space now that we can purchase in anticipation of that happening. And we've been doing it. I've been sitting in this chair on Sunday mornings talking to a screen. And if you're at all familiar with how I preach, you can appreciate how much of a restraint that is, not being able to move and no one engaging you verbally. That's one of the complications I'm running into. But to the point that Sister Apostle made, we have been able to do things that we couldn't do before. It's one of those things where we had to, when it's after when it's all said and done, and we sit down as a team and we assess what just happened, we have to admit that had we not been in the middle of a pandemic, some of the things that we just benefited from would not have occurred. So we had a women's conference in the fall, and they were able to have more speakers for a significantly lower price because they figured out how to bring them in live from their different locations all over. They covered 4 time zones, different locations all over the country via Zoom. And we would have had to fly them in and have them in hotels, and that could travel and room and board would have been a bit additional cost. And it may even affect, we may have accidentally discovered how we will handle that conference going forward.
Yes.
And we start every year with something we call the Solemn Assembly. So we have a week of fasting, and the Sunday at the end of that, we hand the microphone to the congregants and we say to them, "You're preaching the sermon. So you tell us what God did in and through you over the course of this week of fasting and prayer." And I was concerned about it. We had an elders meeting and I communicated my concerns about how we were going to get that done in this format. But I too am surrounded by people who are much more technically capable than I am, and one of our guys said I can promote people to be to the panelists so they can testify, and then we can turn them back to viewers, and it happened seamlessly. I think that software like Zoom has figured out, since so many people are using it, we have to make some adjustments. Here's the reason I want to be careful that I don't complain about it too much. 102 or 103 years ago, we had a very similar pandemic, a flu pandemic, and they didn't have this technology. So one of 2 things were happening. They were either not gathering, or they were, and the gathering was killing people. We have the benefit of being able to do this without anyone being put into jeopardy. And I want to praise God for having done that for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. And I think if nothing else, this pandemic has kind of bridged that gap between the older generation and the younger generation. And as was preached to me since I was a child of a child, um, there's always been this great big divide. But when we talk about the Black church and what we witnessed in 2020, we all sat here together back in July as we watched the world mourn so many Black deaths. And then we went through a very interesting election where you had one candidate who was pushing science and talking about the facts, and you had another candidate who was pushing his name and talking about just what he has done. I think this opportunity has really brought us together in a way, but there are still some places that we might be lacking. When we talk about really gathering together virtually, what has that been like for you as far as being able to connect to your younger people? Do you believe that there is a greater sense and appreciation for the use of social media? And do you think young people now have a greater appreciation for the ministry, or vice versa? Do you think it's been a little detrimental? And do you feel like we've kind of invaded into their place and space? Kind of talk to me about that.
Well, for me, it's all of the above. I think that so we have a rather diverse church, and I'm not just referring to ethnicity and culture. We also have a very generationally diverse church. So there are people in the church who are my parents' age, and then there are people in the church who are not significantly older than my children. In fact, I'm in the least represented demographic in our church. We had a conversation about that the other day. And I've noticed that among those who are curmudgeons like me, some of the crowd that's a little bit older than me, this got old really fast. So we have to do things to deliberately keep their attention and keep them invested. Also, our approach to church is not just Sunday morning. We have groups in our homes, and under certain circumstances, those groups are small enough for them to gather. But even now, that's not even safe. So, but one of the benefits was that we don't just emphasize Sunday morning. I noticed among younger people that this was a joy. In fact, our attendance went up significantly on Sunday morning because they don't have to get dressed and drive 5-10 minutes to go somewhere. I know we have it set up as a panel discussion where it's just the worship leader, the pastor who's hosting, and the pastor who's preaching. And because you can't see everyone is in attendance, we can see who's there, but we can't see them. Their cameras are not on. I know people are in Barca lounges in their pajamas, watching us on smart TV. I absolutely know.
Eating cereal.
I'm not kidding. Some of them actually took photos of themselves doing it and posted that to social media. And one young lady, even you can see her house slippers on at the bottom of the screen. Can we do this from now on? She's just used to it. My concern is, will we be able to transition them?
Yes, exactly.
So we've learned some things here, how we will handle this medium once we're able to gather in person again. How we will use it, but how we will not use it. I don't want anyone to get the impression that this can exist at the expense of us being in the presence of one another. I will say this. I noticed that even among that younger crowd, they miss one another. I think that I once heard Eric Clapton say that that every now and then he would put his guitar in a closet and wouldn't touch it for a while, and he would wait until he longed for it before he would play again. And it would return him to those early years. We had a passion for playing. I think that one of the things God was doing here is, I don't know how it is in your part of the world. I live in a very pagan city. It's one of the reasons we planted the church here. I grew up in Dallas, and my goal was to get back to Dallas. But I went to seminary in Denver, and I was introduced to a world that was nothing like the world I came from. So I grew up with guys who would sell crack on Saturday night. But when they got home, their grandmother would take them to church. They weren't Christians, but they were Christianized. And then I moved to a city that has an emotional reaction to being fake like that. So they don't care that you know what horrible lives they are living. They don't care that when I would do premarital in Texas, people were living together, but they would try to hide it from me. I get to Denver, and the first meeting that comes, like, listen, this is our business. We want you to take care of this wedding, and don't worry about what we're doing. I live in a very pagan city, and I think that they took for granted what the gathering is because of how that pagan bent is a part of who we are. And I think God is doing something in that he took something away from us, longed for it. And I know that when we are able to have that first fully convened, everyone's back together, everyone's going to be bouncing off the walls because they haven't had a chance to enjoy this thing that they took for granted for so long.
Are we going full? Not to pick on Kojic, but are we going full Kojic when we go back to church? Are we? I mean, we coming out of shoes and dancing down the aisles because, you know, like you said, this is a new reality, and you know, for my generation in particular, it's really been hard for us. And I when it first started, we kind of were like, all right, let's take it serious. And then it kind of gradually moved into, okay, I'm gonna go get a COVID test. Once I get negative, I'm gonna see y'all at the next barbecue, or, you know, we're gonna do this, and then I'm gonna get tested again, and we're gonna do this. But, you know, it's safe to say that the church, and more so the African-American community, is taking seriously just how important it is for us to be at home and to worship in our homes. But it also is teaching us, I forget the Sunday school lesson from years ago, but it also is teaching us that worship starts in the house, right? This is the first place. And so before I even went anywhere Sunday morning, my grandmother would sit me down at the table and we would go through my primary Sunday school book. And you know, I would know my memory verse and I would know those things. So that way, when I got to church on Sunday, there was already something within me that was ready to pour out all of my worship. And so that is so important, Pastor Washington. Apostle, you're here in Atlanta with me, and everything is closed but open here. So how are you? How is your congregation navigating? You know, how are your young people coping with this? Are they feeling like, you know, being online is kind of invading their space now, or are they receptive? Talk to me about that.
I don't think that it's a matter of invading their space. To be honest, I think it's convenience, as Pastor Washington was saying. It is a convenience because, you know, people are used to living their lives in the fast pace. And when you know that you are the church, so now I think there may be a difference in this conversation as it relates to those who know they are the church and those who think that the building is the church. And so for those who know they are the church, it has not been as challenging, I believe, but I do think that coming back together will be more of a challenge than any of us want to admit. Okay. Now, for people in my genre, I think that the convenience of it is starting to settle in, and we probably missed it more than the young people. But by the same token, we know what it is to be alone. We know what it is to sit and be quiet. And we've come to a place of this is okay because we understand that inner depth of worship. And I'm not saying this is exclusive, but as a rule of thumb, just by nature, experience, and age. And young people are used to gathering, you know, all the time, and it's their friends and it's their this. We learn how to live with ourselves, if I can say it that way. So I think there's a cross, and it just depends on where that person is as it relates to their inner relationship and peace with God. I think that really makes the big difference. It may not always be an age thing, but to some degree, I think it does hold some value and weight. Now, when it's time to come back together, I'm honestly a bit concerned about the school-age mothers. Because it's one thing, you know, to miss a Sunday or so because you're tired or you're ripping and running, or, you know, you've had a long week. But now we've got parents, young parents in particular, who do not have to get their children up for school. That's pretty cool. But now they've also gotten comfortable in not having to get those kids ready for church. Come on, we're not going to be late. Come on, you know, drag them to the car. And, you know, a lot of babies, they be like, why we got to do this every week? I think for going to be more challenged then than it has been in the past. And so one of the things that we are doing, because in all honesty and regretfully so, I realize that we have not accommodated. We have our Sunday morning service, and we have our Monday Bible study, our Wednesday special trainings or whatever, but we had neglected that young group, that baby group, that Sunday school beginners group. And so starting actually this Sunday, we're adding that as part of the Zoom presentation. But let me just be honest here. I've neglected that. As the leader, I have to take responsibility for a year.
Wow.
And the truth is, a lot of these children are not getting up with their parents. We were on at one point at 5 p.m, and now we're on at 8:30. Those kids were somewhere at 5 o'clock on their computer doing their thing, and at 8:30, those babies are still in the bed. And so I'm like, we're losing them. We're losing 1 to 15, because they're not sitting that family around that table and saying, look, apostle's about to preach. They're not Bible study on Monday night and said Pastor Burton is about to teach plain old Bible study, or the first Wednesday we're having a financial. Those kids are not there. Let's be real. And so I don't know about anybody else, but speaking for myself, I'm like, how did I let that happen?
Wow.
Where I didn't think they need their own thing. See, in the house, they had their own thing. But outside of the house now, in this abnormal situation, that slipped through the crack. So in my house, it's like, oh my gosh. So I started putting some things together, and we're going to kick that off. But we're a year late. We are a year late. So we got time to make up. Okay. So it's definitely different. It's definitely going to be a challenge, but I also know that all things work together for the good.
Amen.
And so we are where we need to be in our spiritual head place. God's going to walk us through this. It's a reason, but he's going to walk us on through this. And I'm believing he will redeem the time. The fellowship that goes on after the benediction. We talk about when we come in, we're going to be, tambourines marching down the aisle. The things that happen after the benediction, if we just be real, that's really what make people like, I love my church. It's not always just the preaching, the prophetic, the anointing, the laying on the hands, the song, but it's the fellowship, the camaraderie that we build over the coffee, or over, well, what did you cook? Just talking about how the kids are doing. And when we sit down in the pews and hang out until the people flip the lights, say, look, where you going, but you got to leave here. It's the fellowship that I think we've missed so much. In addition, not to take definitely nothing away from the gathering for the word, but the fellowship. So we're so looking forward to that. And I'm praying that on top of the word and the anointing will be enough to bring the house back under one roof at the appropriate time.
There's I love quoting hymns, because that's what I grew up on. I grew up on hymns. We grew up on the church hymnal. But there's a song that says, when the redeemed are gathering in, washed like the snow and free from all sin, how we will shout and how we will sing when the redeemed are gathering in. And that you spoke to just the power of the church being here and not just the building. We go to a place. I mean, we could have church outside. My uncle would always say, if I tell you to go outside and preach to 5 homeless people, that's church. There is your church. You don't need all of the lights and everything. Those are just additions that make it feel, but it's not church. As we talk more so about just the state of the Black church, we have to pause for a moment to recognize that something interesting has happened within the last 2 weeks. We witnessed here and around the country, I think for the first time, Georgia was on everybody's mind. We really witnessed a Black man become a United States Senator. And not only is he just a Black man, it is crazy that he's a Black man from Georgia and became a United States Senator, but his mother was a sharecropper. Not only was his mother a sharecropper, he stands in the pulpit of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He not only stands in that pulpit, but he is the same guy who pastors John Lewis, and to this day pastors Dr. King's sister, the Dr. Willie Christine King Ferris, who is 93. And so as we witness history unfold that night early in the morning, history came back and was like, yeah, boom, we witnessed an insurrection, a domestic terrorist attack on the United States Capitol. And as leaders, because we have to tie the two in together. We have to tie that together. Because had David Perdue won and had Kelly Loeffler won, we probably would have never even seen the attack on the Capitol. We'd be having a different conversation. We have to talk about just how monumental that is for a pastor to now be going to the United States Senate. And that's not to say that it probably has not been done before. Maybe I'm just ignorant to the fact. But that's monumental for Dr. King's third or fourth successor to go to Washington and be across the mall working to change those laws that Dr. King had a dream about. What for you as leaders of your congregations, how did you react to that? What was your response to that?
Yeah. Personally, I think the reality of it is still brings me to a place of awe. Not so much because it is a reality, but because it's still somewhat so unacceptable until it caused a major, outbreak. And I know that it's not this one event in and of itself. These, what we saw and witnessed on the 6th has been in the making for a very long time, but it's been an undercurrent. Now, the interesting thing is this. Church, as we know it, what are we looking forward to as it relates to the Black church? Where do we stand? Where are we going? If we have to go back to history, as you just talked about, but let's look at the fact that when the Black church first began to come together, being real plain here, it was the slave owners who would beat them for praying and meeting and singing the songs of Zion. The church has always been, and some may have an issue with this, and it's their issue, but the church has always been the meeting place for so many things as it relates to our community, including political issues. And the truth is, we can never come into a place of transition unless we have a confrontation. Confrontations is what bring about transitions. And so we don't like that, because we've been so conditioned wrong to be peacekeepers versus peacemakers. There is a difference. Wow. And in order to make peace, we have to have confrontations. And so it's a horrific thing what is taking place, but it was necessary, because now those that have been hiding are exposed. They expose themselves. And we are going to see from top to bottom, to the minutest of neighbors, friends. We are about to see those who have been hiding in plain sight. Woo! This is necessary. So I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. We're praying about it. But the truth is, we cannot experience change until there is a confrontation. Everybody I talked this morning about, we all walking around, just want to keep peace, but it's so much tension. You're in the same house. People are not speaking. I just want to keep peace. I ain't going to say nothing. Well, doggone it, put it on the table. Because this is keeping peace is something on the inside being torn up. Your mind is in warfare. Your body is in warfare. And it's not until we say, let's bring this to the table and talk about it and deal with it, then we can come to some conclusions that make sense. But all this peacekeeping, that ain't even scriptural.
Rightly divided, Apostle. Rightly divided.
What she said.
But it has to be. We have to know how to, but it has to be confronted. It has to be confronted. So take the mask off, take the hoods off, whatever else, take it off, and let's just deal with it. And I really think this is necessary. So let me just Go ahead.
All right. So
I think you got the mic, Apostle. I'm gonna send you the gold mic. I'm gonna send you the gold one.
I cannot amend anything she said. So okay, so here's what I want to say about that. I believe that because the context of this is the state of the Black church. I believe that the Black church is re-entering its heyday. I believe that's happening. I believe to the point that Sister Apostle made. I think that when during slavery, there were slave masters, slave owners who were concerned about sharing the gospel with their slaves for fear of them recognizing that it is an emancipating faith. We don't want, wait a minute, we don't want them to know what we know.
That's right.
Because if they know what we know, then they will challenge what we are doing, and they will do it on the basis of the faith that we now share. And they were not wrong when they had that concern, because slaves, many of whom could hardly read because it was against the law for them to learn how to do so, they managed to maneuver the scriptures in ways that the people who enslaved them could not. And they saw the significance of God, how God is a deliverer and he's the keeper of people, and that there is neither slave nor free in the kingdom that we all
come on now. That's right.
So I think that model was innate to the church. There's a very good book written by Dr. Carl Ellis entitled Free at Last. And he does a very good job of pointing out how the oppression and marginalization of African Americans gave rise to the specific form of evangelicalism that Black people practice. A part of the Black evangelical perspective is what is it to be marginalized, and what is it to be someone who pursues justice? And they do not separate those two things from the gospel. So whenever someone says to me, why do you always have to talk about social justice? Why do you have to talk about racism? Why do you have to always talk about brokenness? Just preach the gospel. I said, okay, you give me conflicting duties here, because if I preach the gospel, then I have to talk about justice, and I have to talk about emancipation, and I have to talk about marginalization. This very morning, I was a guest at another church, and they asked me to come preach in Ephesians chapter 2, 1 through 10 of Ephesians 2, Jesus' death and resurrection reconciled us to God. 11 through 22, his death and resurrection reconciled us to one another. Same gospel.
Come on.
Gospel. So you have to use that death and resurrection to confront everything that is broken. It's the reason I hate when someone says we do not have a race problem, we have a sin problem. But if the sin is racism, that's a dumb thing to say.
It's one of the same. Yes.
It's a ridiculous thing to say. So I really struggle with that. I believe that the church, the Black church, is re-entering its heyday. I believe that anyone who believes that it was just a part of American culture, a part of the American ethical model, that one day people would be emancipated. I have friends who tell me this, that when I was in seminary, they would say the circumstances we're in now were inevitable. It was always a part of the trajectory. My question is, then why did the country have to be drugged, kicking and screaming into it? You're ignoring aspects of history. The Black church had to drag the country kicking and screaming toward the semi level playing field that we have now. And I believe that it was never fully resolved, and January 6th showed us that. So the image I have in my head here is, if you are so privileged that you are at 10 and everyone else is at 1, and it's a zero-sum game, so you have to give up something so that the people who are at the bottom can have something. And you go from 10 to 7 so that everyone else can go from 1 to 4. You're still way out ahead of them, but you will cry oppression because you had to go from 10 to 7. And you're ignoring how far ahead of everyone else you are. It's the church's job to confront that flawed view of justice.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
We're the only ones who have a comprehensive gospel message that can confront that. It's the church's job. And I believe that the Black church is uniquely qualified because in America, because of our views regarding marriage and sexuality, and our views regarding the right to life, both pre and post birth, those views are going to result in the church in general being marginalized, and the dominant culture church does not know how to lead from the margins. They've never had to. Since the country's inception, The dominant culture church has been at the hub of cultural influence.
Wow.
But the Black church changed the country from the margins. They didn't do that from the seat of power. We've mentioned Dr. King. We mentioned John Lewis. We're mentioning C.T. Vivian and these leaders who are making a cultural influence from the marginalized position. It behooves the dominant culture to sit at the feet of the subdominant culture. I'm gonna be careful in the language I'm using here. I use dominant versus subdominant instead of minority and majority, because I believe that that's misleading, because it's possible for you to be the majority. It's possible for you to be the minority and still be the dominant culture. And I think
Say that.
America, okay? If you want to get a glimpse of that, look at South Africa. Look at Australia, okay?
Yes.
So in our lifetimes, the white population is going to become a minority population, but if we're not attentive to the balance, they will still be the dominant culture.
That's good.
Okay?
Yes.
And they do not know how to lead from the margins. So here's what they did. They aligned themselves with political power so they can maintain influence. And that's not working. And instead of going to the feet of the church that knows how to lead from the margins, they threw a tantrum on January 6th and attacked the seat of that political power because they do not know what else to do.
My God.
And since they are now approaching that season of just being destitute, it is the Black church's job to step into its heyday and show the world what it looks like to be the model of character, to be the model of ethics, to be the model of kingdom living, to be ambassadors for our King, and to do that from the marginalized position, because the Black church has known nothing except leading from that place.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Apostle.
John Maxwell, I think it's in the book, The 21 Laws of Leadership, I think. But anyway, he talks about, or it's either the 360-degree leader, but he talks about leading from any position. And that's the thing. Let's just be real. We have had the ability to lead from any position.
That's all I'm saying.
We can go to the base of just sports. Okay? Different locker room, different equipment, minor pay, but yet be the main one on the field. So just from if we just take something as simplistic as sports, we have had the ability to lead from any position. Nelson Mandela was leading from prison. Let's be real. It was his philosophies, his teachings. It don't matter. There is something within. And when you've been pushed, pressed, poked at, we know how to go inside and pull up, and it's in all of us, but it's something about an oppressed people. When you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, watch out. And so we are at that point, at that place where you are reigning and ruling. And if you just, let's just be real. We have had a Black president. We are about to have the first Black woman in position in the second most powerful seat in the United States of America. It is not just about who won in Georgia. It is about, doggone it, we got him out of here, and now look at this. And I ain't trying to be funny, but them women went to work. Do you hear me? Yep. And it is something about the culture of a people who are sick and tired of being oppressed that will bring out the lion, the lioness, the fight. And so we better, in other words, you ever put your children on timeout for cutting up? You about to be put on time. Don't nobody want to be in timeout. Because you miss everything. You don't get to participate in the ice cream and the hot dog and the nacho party. You don't get to go skating. You don't get to do this. You don't get to do that. Yeah. Why? Because you've been cutting up, and so get in time out. Now, I'm sorry. I'm just talking as a mama right now. I think the problem is I don't want to be in time out. I know I've been cutting up. I know I've been showing my tail. But please don't put me in timeout. So before I go to timeout, let me throw a real good tantrum. Woo! And get all my frustrations out and try to scare and intimidate you from putting me in timeout. This is a scare tactic. I'm sorry. Timeout. Go somewhere and sit down. Everybody is not on the wrong team simply based on the color of their skin.
My Lord.
But if we real about it, there are some folks that I'll just say in my little old circle. And I'm like, whoa, I've been knowing them 37 years since before my daughter was born. This how you really been feeling?
Wow.
Exposed.
I want to read just a portion of Dr. King's speech. You know, we all hear the repeated stanzas of the I Have a Dream, but I want to read this portion that really stuck out to me. It says, when the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But then Dr. King said something that really sticks out. He says, but we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt.
My God.
You know,
oh my God.
Let me read this part. He says, we refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. If we could just pause for a moment and talk about the depth of how deep Black people have gone every single time they've tried to apply for something, every single job opportunity that they've gone up against, every time that they moved into a neighborhood that wasn't theirs or a sundown town, every time they've gone somewhere and they've been denied service, even in 2020, every time you're stopped by the police and instead of being questioned, you're gunned. You don't even get the opportunity to state your name, give your license and registration because you are already a threat. If we could just for a moment just realize now that those words that Dr. King reiterated some 50 odd years ago about how we refuse to believe that America is bankrupt on her promises, that we are now, like you said, Pastor Washington, coming into our majority, our place of majority, where we can unseat people who have sat in these seats because of either their tenure or their money. Let's just be real about it.
That's right.
Let's be real about it, because there is no way in Georgia it should be possible that in the year 2021 we are just now witnessing a Black man become the United States Senator and a Jewish man. Let us not forget our Jewish brother. Let us not forget how crazy Georgia was with this whole election. Georgia was like, you're going to take Don Lewis, Joseph Lowry, C.T. Vivian. We're going to have a whole riot with Rayshard Brooks. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put Joe and Kamala, and then we're going to send you a Jew and a Black. The white man's worst fear. A Jew, I'm sorry, let's be real. A Jewish man and a Black man. America.
And my brother,
like check is it can't bounce anymore. There's no more rubber bands on this check. We got to get what's ours now. We got to get what's ours. And it's unfortunate that we had to witness Dr. King go from having a dream to be a martyr. But look at us now. Going back to the bank and saying, okay, I want everything that you've had with my interests. Because putting Kamala in office was cashing the check. John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock was getting the interest. That's
and 33 years old.
33 years, yes, 33
years old. As Pastor Brian pointed out, there is some significance there that this Jewish man, John Ossoff, is 33 years old. Come on, So we, you know, we got to look at this thing and know that God is a God of redemption. Now, it's not going to be easy. You know, we having a good conversation. It's real, it's live, but we have to also understand this is not going to be easy, because the transition in and of itself is a transaction, and it has to be some exchanges. And so that's where prayer is going to be needed. And this to me is where, or why, the positions that we have as spiritual leaders is so significant. One of the main things that the origin of many churches, but in particularly the Black church, was used for, the buildings were used for school, elementary schools on up.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we're going to have to go back. And it cannot be church as usual. I've been saying this for years. And we are now in that place where we are experiencing, it is not church as usual, but we have to go back, and the church, the building, the brick and mortar aspect of it has to become, again, a training place, a training ground. All right? Because if you've been second, third, fourth, last, you don't even know how to act when your opportunity come to be first.
My.
Wow.
We have
Okay.
to do.
Y'all messing me up. I don't know. let me tell you how true that is. Okay, so I believe that, I think that, just setting aside for a moment the political implications of this, just assess it for a second from the sociological aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia had the ability to elect a Black senator years ago.
Yes.
Years ago. Think about this for a second. There were at least 800,000 unregistered Black voters. That's a sample. That's a sample, by the way. That's actually the actual number. That's how many were transitioned from unregistered to registered. That number, if you found 800,000, that number is in the millions. But here's what happened to the whole idea of not knowing how to be first. Mm-hmm. In Georgia, it was such a foregone conclusion that the state makes its decisions in one direction, that Black people in Georgia decided there's nothing we can do. There's no need of even trying.
Yep.
And then a woman showed up and said, "Y'all don't understand."
Come on now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I want one of the struggles. Forget the politics of it. I'm struggling with this, and because everyone's going to miss this. A presidential election was turned on its head because of Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And it wasn't all of Georgia. It was not all of Michigan. It was not all of Pennsylvania. It was Atlanta. It was Detroit. And it was Philadelphia. So an election turned on its head because of cities that are populated by Black people. Yeah. I think that they did not appreciate what capacity they had. And so one thing we'll run the risk of doing is sitting back and letting life happen to us instead of confronting the circumstances as God intended. And it's because someone has convinced us that you are much less powerful than you actually are. 800,000 people minimum. That's how many people Stacey Abrams was able to get registered. Yeah. It's probably in the millions. Yeah. And 800,000 made all the difference in the world. Now, here's why I think you have to be mindful of this. If you do not put yourself in the center of influence, then the concerns, the values, the burdens that you have will either be ignored or misunderstood by those who are in that seat of influence. Mm-hmm. So you have to put yourself in a place where the lens through which you see the world becomes known. Okay, so Zave, I am married to your cousin. She is from Houston, Texas. And the bigger thing is she is a biological connection to you. So there are certain things I had to promise her before we got married. I'll say this for the record. You came by that gold microphone, honestly, because that's how that side of our family, that's how they roll. So I promised Cherie that you will not have to drive a minivan when we get married. She's like, I don't want a minivan. I need a Suburban with 24-inch rims and some spinners. It's a Houston thing. Okay.
Come on,
so but then we had kids, and the car she had was too small,
Mhm.
so we had to get something bigger. And I was trying to convince her to get a Chrysler Town and Country, and she said no.
Mhm.
So I rented one on a trip to Texas. We test drove it for 1,000 miles, basically. And
Mhm.
before we got to Texas, she was down with the car. So we got back and we bought it. And as we were leaving the parking lot
Mhm.
of the dealership, a Chrysler Town and Country passed right by us. And we saw several of them before we got home. Chrysler Town and Country and a Dodge Caravan is the same thing. Before we got home, we saw about 4 or 5 of them. And I remember, the topic of conversation was, I've never seen one before, but that's the most sold minivan in minivan history. They were always there. Those minivans were always there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that we did not have lenses to see them
Yeah.
until we had an experience with it. It's irresponsible for people of color to not bring their marginalized, persecuted, experienced lenses to the conversation. Because if you don't bring those lenses, then no one will see it. Once you have the lenses, you will see it much more readily. You will see it everywhere. I believe that it's an abdication of our responsibility, especially to subsequent generations, for us to not force those lenses upon the world that wishes to ignore, deny that they exist. So when I hear close friends of mine, I've had very similar experiences to Sister Apostle, in that like I have a friend with whom I went to seminary. He says, "Why are you on this soapbox about COVID? It only affects the weak." And I said to him, "By weak, you mean Black and brown people. By weak, you mean people of a certain age. By weak, you mean people with pre-existing conditions. You have a flawed view of humanity." And I had to sit him down. This was not, by the way, fruitful. It did not get to where I wanted to go. I'm trying to sit him down and say, the people to whom you refer as weak are human beings. I'm trying to give him lenses that see it properly. When I talk about what is to be marginalized, the thing I notice is that my white friends, will oversimplify history. And say, Brandon, slavery ended in 1863. Wait a minute, what about Jim Crow and the Great Compromise and separate but equal? There's a reason we needed a Civil Rights Act in 1964, a full century after that slavery that you say ended. There's a reason it happened. You're reading history through the lenses of your privileged perspective. It's my responsibility to force upon them on many occasions, force upon them lenses that see that it's not as simple as you think. I need for everyone to pause for a second and realize this. It's 2021, and there were Confederate flags flown at the Capitol building. One was being marched through the building. 1863. It's 2021, and with no mask, no shame, photos everywhere. A man is walking through the Capitol building with a symbol of slavery. States were fighting for the prerogative to own human beings, and that flag is a symbol of it.
It's a whole other country's flag, Pastor. That flag belongs to that is the Confederate States of America flag. That is a whole nother country's flag being flown in our capital. It does not even belong to the United States. It is a part of our history, but that's the Confederate States. They were a separate country.
It's treason. It was war.
It is
and we took it to the Capitol, and we did that. We did that a century and a half after that slavery that everyone thinks is a thing of the past.
You know, we got to get ready to get out of here. But before we go, we have to thank God for Stacey Abrams, because she truly took and brought life where the Bible speaks to us and says, the first shall be last.
The last.
And the last shall be first. And she, what my generation would call an L, she took an L and still found a way to make me win. And if that does not speak to the resilience of Black people, you still cannot hold me down. Listen, I mean, it could be your local drug dealer, it could be the popsicle lady, it could be the candy lady. There is a hustle that is given to us that is unmatched. This woman could have went back to her house. She could have went back to practicing privately in law. She could have gone and ran again for the state legislature. She took her public humiliation and said, God, work your magic. And out of public humiliation, God showed us how he can elevate you so that people around you will now fear you. How do what's the white man's greatest fear? It's not a black man, it's a black woman. Let's call it. I mean, black men, we are physically intimidating to a white man, but a black woman with her natural hair and all of her beautiful curves came and said, okay, y'all don't want me to be the governor? That's cool. Let me show you what else I can do. And took America by storm for 3 weeks. Two of the biggest holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, were racked with Georgia commercials. Georgia commercials as to getting people out to vote, and the way that she energized her base. Pastor Washington, I know you're not here in Atlanta, but I have never seen so many black ministers come together. But just as many that came together for Dr. Warnock, there were just as many that were tearing this man down. Oh, he believes this, and he stands on this, and he's divorced from his wife. Listen, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, what are we doing to ensure that the advancement of all God's people is going to go forward? I mean, that's the definition of a true come up, getting it out the mud. You lost. You lost a whole governorship, and you came back. Oh man, I wish I had that kind of testimony. I don't want to lose in public, don't get me wrong, but if I gotta lose and really be my brother and sister's keeper,
come back.
God, I thank you for trusting me enough with that trouble then, so that we can have a victory right now. That's the definition of waiting on the Lord. That's some true waiting.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the power of submission too, because when you, as women, we came here submissive. You see what I'm saying? We came out of the side of man, and because we came out of the side of man, it's almost like an auto submission. I don't know how to really say this, but at the end of the day, for you to lose the way she did, and she did okay, let's be honest. For the governorship to be stolen.
Yes.
And for you to say, okay, I'm not going to be bitter, I'm going to be better. And to actually go to the extremities that she did to be better, to me, speaks to such a level of submission. And I think that that's one of the reasons that women can be so powerful, because there is so much power and understanding that a loss doesn't have to be a loss unless you don't have the right mind frame. But when you have the right state of mind and you know who you are, I'll submit to the moment. So I can reach my glory, so I can reach where I need to be. So I know what to do. And so with that being said, she understood, okay, maybe I misjudged my season for this position. It took that loss for her to really fulfill the calling for the season. Now, what will happen after this? I ain't even worried about my girl. Man, because once you know how to submit to the moment, no matter how degrading, embarrassing, humiliating, or unfair it is, that is a powerful thing. And so for all the people of God, if we can just understand that if we take those types of educational moments and build on it, rather than to sow, Paul said, forgetting those things which are behind. It's one thing I do. We got to get in the press. We got to get in the press.
Go ahead, Pastor.
I do not want to be. I'll tell you how I view what happened in Georgia. This is coming from someone who is 2 time zones away. I do not want to be known as someone who was known. I believe that one of the problems of the last generation and a half, something that drives me crazy about, I'm going to get in trouble for this, I'm sure, but for Gen X and Y, well, millennials and Y, is we entered into a season of you are famous because you are famous. That became a thing. So what's his or her talent? They don't have one. They're just famous for being famous.
My God.
And I do not want to be known for being known. I want to be known as a
Yeah.
world changer, which means if no one ever knows that I'm the one who did it, but the world was changed, I'm good with that.
Mm.
If no one ever knows that I'm the one who did it, but the change occurred,
Yes.
I think that's how she approached this.
Yes.
Yes.
Georgia
Yes.
would have been better off electing her governor, because then she would have been too busy.
Come on now.
She
Say
would've had
that.
time. Come on.
Yeah, so she like, I didn't, you guys understand this. I didn't come here to be governor. I came here to change. When I heard the story of how in her youth she won an academic award, and when she went to receive that award, she was turned away because she and her family had to ride there on a public bus, and the security guard said no one who is invited to this building would be coming on a bus. So her family was turned away. When that was the day when Georgia was in trouble.
Yeah.
That was the you messed up here. Okay. So
Come on.
on that day, her goal was not to become the governor. Her governor was to make change. She ran for governor to make change. And then God said, no.
It's bigger than that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the office where she had thought she was going to make the change was not given to her, but the obligation to change something was never removed. So she said, I'll do what I'll do. Since this election, because I got to tell you something, coming from 2 time zones away, I did genuinely mourn the circumstances where the attorney general is running for an office, overseeing an election in which he is a candidate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did say, okay, that is shadiness in plain sight. I'm just talking about the state for a second. That was shade in plain sight. And I did struggle with that. But I think that the way that it was taken from her only increased her resolve. It increased her commitment. It increased her saying, you know what, the change to which I've been called is going to happen. And I don't think she could have influenced a state, and I want to be clear on this, not just a state, but a national election.
Yes.
Georgia did something that Georgia does not do.
Ever.
Okay? She didn't just influence a state election, but a national election. That would not have happened had she received the things she was supposed to have. I don't like making too many super Bible comparisons, but Joseph went through a hard time so that the people delivered. Right. I think she was bigger than that. Lost because had she won, God doesn't look at, God plays the whole chessboard. So God's not just talking about today. God's thinking about 2 years from now. Had she won, then some of the things that were affected, more than a year later would not have occurred. I think it was supposed to be that way. And the blessed thing about it is she has the fortitude, she has the resolve, and she can remember what it was like to be that little girl who was academically impressive, but couldn't get into a building to receive her award because her parents were too poor to afford a car. Was turned away for that.
So simple, so minute.
On that day, that particular security guard did not realize what he was doing, but he changed the course of Georgia and eventually the country, because that person who was turned away influenced a state and national election. This is no small thing.
My.
I mean, you know what? There's nothing more that can be said, because at the end of the day, when it's time for a revolution to start, we don't have to go out and seek and look for people. Revolution is right there. It's always been right here. And for centuries, as we've shared many times on this show, for years, the Black church has always been the pinnacle. It's always been the nucleus for the revolution. But in 2021, it is upon us. It's on our shoulders, my generation, your generations, to come together and to realize that what we have already started, it has to continue. Irregardless of one particular leader. That's the difference between this movement and the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement, if Dr. King says we're going to Selma, we're going to Selma, or if Dr. Vivian is already down there, we're going to send troops down there. Now we're not pointing out leaders.
Right.
We're holding each other accountable. Because if you get out and do your part, I don't do my part, then there's no need for us to have a leader because neither one of us is holding our weight. A leader is just that. They're holding that title, that space. But if I'm holding you accountable as my brother and as my sister, and I see you and I say, listen, you know we need to get ourselves together. You know you've got brothers and sisters out there that aren't voting, that aren't participating, that are living in willful ignorance. That's on us to say, all right, you know what? You need to get off your behind. You need to get off your behind and do what's necessary. It's just like you said, Pastor Washington, that security guard had no idea. He's the reason America's getting ready to go through a whole complete reformation. Shout out to him. I hope he's not dead. And I really hope he's able to sit here and witness just how foolish his decision was. But we're grateful. We're grateful that that stumbling block actually turned out to be a detour for a greater path. That's all it boils down to. You know, we're so blessed as a culture because even in our hardest and darkest moments, we still find a way to have joy. And we have to give God the glory for that. We still find a way to have joy. When people were killing our children, even coming across the seas in the slave trade, there was singing. There is just something joyful about our spirit and our nature. And we have to thank God for that because not every culture can say that. I mean, we witnessed it. We've yet to see Black people go to a state capitol and tear things down without it being a mass murder.
Wow.
We've yet to witness that. I mean, when they started protesting Rayshard Brooks, you know, we had a thing amongst ourselves at the funeral home. Like, listen, we need to get the pickup bands ready and get the body bags ready because this is about to get ugly.
Wow.
Like that, those are the things. But see, if we don't have these real conversations about what goes on in our community, who will? Because they all got together and listen, the craziest thing that I saw, and we're getting ready to get out of here. Craziest thing that I saw on January 6th is they had t-shirts, not t-shirts that they were printing on site, t-shirts that they brought, which means you pre-planned this. You were prepared to you were prepared to do something.
Yeah.
And to listen to CNN and MSNBC talk about how the intelligence community ignored all these signs and this, that, and the other. Listen, for Black people, we don't even have to go through all that. It ain't never been that deep because we've always been oppressed. It's never that deep. But the difference between Black people and our other brothers and sisters is no matter how many times you oppress us, we keep coming back. We keep coming back because we love just that much. We have just that much passion within us. And that's what we've got to keep in our hearts and minds. As the Black church, we got to keep that passion, be it socially distant, be it together again, whatever the case may be. We got to keep that passion because if we don't keep that passion, then we're going to find ourselves in 6 years looking at another red state. And we can't have that again. We've started this trend. Let us continue this trend. Nehemiah was like, listen, I'm not coming down from here. Y'all want to do all this talking and this, that, and the other? I've already started a great work. Why would I come down to meet with you? For what?
That's what he said.
Why would I come down to meet with you? What is there for us? Don't you see what I'm doing here? Don't you see what I've started? And so you have come to distract me, to deter me, to stop me from my great work. This is look up. This is a great work. This is a great work. This is God's work. I'm not coming down. So you stay right here and watch the great work. If I come down, now I'm on your level. And see, God never ordained, never mind. Anyway, y'all, listen, it's been such a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure having you, Apostle, having you, Pastor. You both know that I love you tremendously, but thank you for all that you have shared with God's people, with all that you have just poured out. I pray that in this next year, that God bless you, bless your households first and foremost. I know that your cup runs over, but I pray that your tea plate that you sit your teacup on, I pray that runs over onto your good china and your good table, and that even your enemies will come to your house and say, if you don't mind, may I sit and break bread with you? I believe that God is doing something that we've never seen it before, but it's miraculous. I mean, everything that we're laying our eyes on and that comes out of our mouth, it's a miraculous work of God. And so I thank God for that. To all of you all that are watching, there's no need for me to have a Zave's final moment, because if you didn't get full tonight, you need to go all the way back to the very beginning and watch it from jump. God has been so great to us. We've already started 2021. Let me get this man's dinner ready. You want some chicken? That's your wife, Pastor.
Feed the men of God. Feed them now. Feed them.
Listen, I want you all to make sure that you tune in and watch us next Sunday. As like I said, we'll be talking to 4 individuals about the healing and the grieving process and just how they've overcome. 2 lost their sons to suicide. A young mother lost her daughter at the age of 7, I believe. And then I'll also be sitting down with my best friend who at the age of 24 had to bury her mother who passed of cancer. And so we're going to really get into it next week. So I really want you to come on back, invite your friends, because in our community, we talk about death, but we don't talk about healing. And so in the same manner that God was able to send his son to die, there was a healing that had to take place in order for us to really live. And so we thank God for that. Listen, I love each and every one of y'all to pieces. Thank you so much for joining us. Listen, I'm on fire. Let's keep Zave's Corner going. Thank y'all so much, Pastor and Apostle. I love you guys. Y'all have a great night. All right.
You have a good night.
God bless you.